both days. So to have two poets coming in conversation this evening to share our lived experiences and how we have navigated them to create a meaningful life, or to dance with this possibility of creating a meaningful life versus living inside various stereotypes. And so this is an opportunity for us to really just give some stank naked truth and just really invite you into the space as we engage in conversation for about 15 minutes or so. Please, if you have any questions or chat, please put it in the chat, or when we are complete our conversation or complete our tete-a-tete, let's say, we'd be more than happy to hear what has come up for you. And so my partner in the walk this evening is Leslie Roach. She's Ottawa-based poet, lawyer, former UN worker, and has just released her first book. I love the title of this book, Finish This Sentence. And so we're about to have some conversation about how she has been on a journey to finish this sentence, or maybe put some other apostrophes in there. I don't know.
I love it.
So we'll just talk about what the, what those exclamation marks, periods, question marks have been for you on this journey. So why don't you kick us off, Leslie, by just sharing just one of your pieces in terms of that has taken you on this journey in terms of creating a meaningful life versus living inside a stereotype.
Oh, thank you, Jacqueline. Thank you. Hi, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. And yes, I'm so excited to be able to share a piece or two from my book, Finish This Sentence, which was published recently during the pandemic by Mowenzi House, that is a publishing house in Toronto that has been publishing diverse voices for many decades. So shout out to them. Okay, so Jacqueline.
We're just gonna go dive right in.
Okay, all right. I have debated so much about which piece I wanted to share. It's always tough because there, I could read any which one. So, okay, without, let me see. Okay, maybe this one. Okay. I never knocked. I've wondered why I never knocked when I was left out in the dark hallway. It was dark in that building, and I was scared. And yet, I never knocked. To the voices inside at the party to let me in. I just cried. So that's my piece. I never knocked from Finish This Sentence.
Wow, beautiful.
Ooh,
Thank you.
We're starting off there, are we?
I didn't know where to start.
So tell me about what inspired that. What inspired that piece? Was there a particular incident that occurred that generated that piece, or was it a culmination of pieces?
Gosh, I think it's a bit of both, but it makes reference to a specific incident when I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my family and I, so my mother, father, brother, sister, we went to a party in an apartment building. So I grew up in Montreal. And so it was one of these big apartment buildings. And we got to the party and the hallways were pitch black. I don't know why, but that's how it was. They were pitch black. So we get to the door, down this very long corridor. My parents, they knock at the door, they go in. By whatever reason, I was left outside. So, I'm 5 years old in a huge, massive building with a long corridor, and I'm just alone. And I didn't knock. I just started to cry, like silently. Tears were, coming down my cheeks, and I could hear my mother saying to the people at the party, maybe they'd been in there like 2 minutes greeting everyone, oh, hi, how's it going? So they they didn't realize I wasn't inside. So I heard my mother's voice, I'm outside, and I hear my mother's voice say, "Where's Leslie? Where Leslie?" She's, with her West Indian, my parents are from Barbados. So, and I'm like, and I didn't think to knock. And then they're like, well, we don't see her. We don't see her. I could hear this, and I'm still outside. And then all of a sudden I see the door open, and I'm like, and my mother is like, why didn't you knock? Why didn't you knock? And yeah, I don't know.
I'm just curious about it. I mean, that's your home alone experience for sure. Well,
Yeah.
or home alone in the passageway. But I'm just curious that sense of knocking, did that play a repeat in your life at any other spaces? Like, have you
Oh my
tracked
gosh.
any other
Yes,
spaces where you've wondered, should I knock or not? And what
exactly.
contributed to that?
Yeah, it's been this whole thing where, I guess I grew up in a very strict household. So you're taught, to be very discreet and, polite and not rock the boat type thing. So I think I've taken that really into different spheres where I might be infringed upon and not say anything, because you internalize that also, because of
Mhm,
the racism I've endured, you kind of internalize a lot of crap.
mhm,
So, yeah, so it's basically that the notion of keeping quiet, even though something is violating you.
mhm.
So that's exactly what my book is about, finding your voice, saying, you know what, this thing is not working for me, whatever
Mhm.
that may be, and however that might manifest itself. Maybe it's a bad job, a bad situation. You're like, okay, no, this doesn't work for me. I need to move on. I need to knock. I need to sound the alarm bell,
Mhm.
and get out. So that's what the journey I think has been about, finding out
Wow.
more and more
Mhm.
what it takes to make you happy.
Mm. And from 5 years old, that message of knocking has been planted. Wow.
Totally, totally.
Well, I want to start with a piece that it's a work in progress, because it's a piece for me that speaks to the influence of my aunt who just made her transition on January 2nd.
Hmm.
And it's an excerpt from a longer piece called My Five Moms. And um, as I get to reflect on her life, I realize how she has been so fundamentally, she has shaped me in so many ways. So it's just a little snippet of that piece. So we called her Glam affectionately in the family.
Mm.
So Glam, unlike George Bailey, you did not need Clarence to show you how the world would be different if you had not been born. Every day, every week, a student called from America, the UK, Japan, or just around the corner to check in with Miss Maxwell. Some dropped by for a visit with their son or daughter to introduce them to the teacher who cared for them like a mother, or to ask your advice about their schooling, their behavior, their possibilities. Glam, we who knew you, the perfectly imperfect you, the work in progress you, the Creator's masterpiece, you embodied your vocation to nurture next generations and your passion for the arts to create balance and joy. There would be no visual artist teacher named Shani without you. There would be no dancer and technology queen named Camila without you. There would be no writer and researcher named Akila without you. There would be no poet, educational administrator named me without you.
Oh, wow.
Oh God, I'm still grieving,
Oh,
so that's a little
what?
bit rough.
Oh my gosh, that is beautiful. When did you write that? Like, right after she
I,
passed?
I started writing it after she passed, and then I've been just chipping away at it. The way we do. We chip at things and chip at
Ugh,
things until
yeah.
it's chiseled into, and
Wow.
so yeah, so until it's chiseled. But she, I mean, when I thought about it, she is my cultural guru. She's
Mm-hmm.
the one who introduced me to the arts, reading, the theater, etc. She's the
Uh-huh.
one who took me to the beach or took me to the parks.
Oh, wow.
She's the one who invited me to open up my life to be able to just witness it.
Oh my
And even
goodness.
perhaps even the crazier, the most important thing, she's the one who always took her birthday off from work. And she said, it's important to celebrate yourself. And so I've adopted that as a
I
philosophy.
love that. Oh man, I'm so sorry for your loss. That is a beautiful ode to a good teacher, a master teacher.
Master teacher. And I love the fact that she recognized that she was not perfect. She recognized that until her last breath that she was still a work in progress. And I think that
Amazing.
whole construction of being able to construct your life, it is actually a dance. Do I construct my life or do I conform? And part of the conforming was to the conditioning, for example, within families, within societies, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So that has been a part of my unfolding as I go through this grieving process for sure.
Right. And when did you start discovering that your society was conditioning you or your
Oh,
environment?
mm, um, I think I started discovering that, you know, um, is there something in particular that stands out when it I think I started discovering that early on because I wanted to be the nice girl. You wanted to be the nice girl. You're
Mm-hmm.
conditioned to be the nice girl because you got a few perks. And one of the
Yes.
perks I got was I was able to follow my grandmother around, and to do her community work. And again, another woman who really instilled life into me to create life in terms of my grandmother's motto was to whom much is given, much is expected. And
Mm-hmm.
so I think that conditioning of giving, being of service as well, was also something that was ingrained in me as
Right.
how you generate life and how
Yeah.
there's always someone for you to give something to.
Yes.
Now the
Mhm.
challenge of that is that you can give so much of yourself that you forget about yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that can have some periods of pain that you go through because you don't recognize that. Was there anything like that for you that showed up in your space? We're both from
Oh my
Caribbean
gosh.
families.
Oh yeah, big time. Big time. It was very much instilled in us that we had to be good and perfect and polite and all of that nice West Indian
but it
conditioning,
but
which
it
is
was
a good thing.
but it
You're
was West Indian with a little bit of colonialism thrown into it because
exactly.
because I know
Yeah.
from my family it
Mhm.
was you have to be good so that people don't, like, you can't mess up the family name. You started
Exactly.
carrying the burden of don't disappoint, don't embarrass,
Don't,
um,
yes.
don't take your business outside of the house. So it's that
Yeah.
conditioning where, particularly as a young Black girl, oh my
Mhm.
gosh, the pressure was high. The expectations were
Yeah,
ridiculously high,
it's
because you
true.
had to be good, you had to be perfect. And that thing about
Exactly.
perfection
Hmm.
carried its own weight. I mean, it's
Oh
almost
my
like
gosh.
so
It really
say some
does.
more about that for you.
No, right, thanks. Yeah, a lot resonates for me there because I had, the same type of upbringing, very strict Christian upbringing. Where you went to church on Sunday. My mother went, my father, he wasn't really into that. So that was cool. He was cool. But still,
Mhm.
I learned a lot of good things there. Um,
Mhm.
yeah. So bring me back, Jackie. I lost my
So no,
train.
well, we were talking about the conditioning, but I want to actually ask you to
Mhm.
segue into that in terms of how that conditioning helped you to find your voice so that you
Right.
can then write the way that you do, because your economy of words is so amazing.
Oh, thank you so much. I take that as a very high compliment. I strive to write simply because, well, that's how I write, you know. Um, so that conditioning, it's been like a mixed blessing. I take it as a in the sense that, let me explain. My
Mhm,
my parents tried to instill good values in me. My mother was a religious tither. I think that's how you pronounce it, you know, when
mhm,
you give the 10%.
mhm, mhm,
Um, and she always believed, you know, don't let the left hand know what the right hand is doing. If you're doing good, do it quietly. You don't have to broadcast it. Just know you've done it, and that should be reward enough that you're doing good. So
mhm,
she gave of herself a lot, to her detriment, I think. Even at her funeral, my her best friend, no, her brother said that, he used to say she was ridiculous for being as generous as she was,
mhm,
but that was just her nature. She was a nurse's aide specialized in gerontology. She would take care of elderly patients who were usually Alzheimer's patients who can be actually, they're combative, they can be
mhm,
violent.
mhm,
So she endured a lot. She worked hard her whole life, would work 12-hour night shifts, my whole time growing up. And my dad too, he also worked long shifts and had two
mhm,
jobs, so they always instilled education in us that we should
mhm,
work hard, study
mhm.
hard, because that was a way out. You can,
Right.
you can get a better job if you go to school, and you can get a better paying job. So they believed
Well,
in
that
that.
well, that education piece I think is so important, because I know the same thing happened in my family where I don't know how my grandparents did it, but their six children, every single one of them went to university, and they
Wow.
were just humble farmers. And they were, but my grandmother insisted that the way out for her children was to have an education. And
Right.
they, every single one of them went through post-secondary education. And so this was, to do that in the 50s and 60s
Mm,
was incredible, in tiny little Jamaica. And so
yeah.
um, that sense of expectations from that perspective. And oh my goodness, I don't know who I thought I was when I was in grade 12, saying to my mother, you know what, mom, I want to take a gap year.
Oh man.
My mother was like, gap what?
Yeah.
It's like, you're going to university, like there's no gap in this thing. So but it was just really interesting how those kinds of blocks mortared this thing about this was your access point to build a meaningful life, your education, your service, all of those things. Now that's what that was instilled in me. But when did you start embracing that or taking that as your own? Do you
Mm.
recognize the moment that for you, this was like, oh, this is actually what I want to do versus what has just been instilled in me?
Oh wow. Yeah, it took a long time, and I would say it's only starting in about 2012. Around 2012 is when I started to feel like, you know what? This is not what I want out of my life.
Mhm, mhm,
I want to write, I want to be
mhm,
a writer. I want to follow that dream of mine of publishing a
mhm,
book. And so slowly I started to disengage, it
mhm,
started, when I started to read the book, The Artist's Way, and
mhm,
giving myself artist dates. I would take myself on artist dates once a week.
mhm,
And at the time, I was living in Tanzania in Dar es Salaam. So I would take myself to this little trinket shop that had crystals, and I'd always liked crystals. So I gave
mhm,
myself permission just to buy one. And, it like I now have a passion for crystals and all kinds of things that I never would have done growing up, because that stuff was like it was considered obia. They call it obia, like voodoo. Like, so I wouldn't dare, tell my mother I'm buying a crystal or something like that. It was, so I gave myself permission, and now I've opened myself up to a realm, like so many possibilities, just by following what feels right, as opposed to doing what I was raised to do or to want, So, but I'm still in the process of disengaging and with my old self, but not, it's still me, but just improved.
Just the you that's improved. Now we've talked about kind of that, that conditioning and that modeling of access to building, quote unquote, the life that a meaningful life. What are some of the stereotypes that you've bumped up against as you've traveled through those particular spaces, whether it's in your international work, whether it's through your schooling, whether some of the service work that you have done?
Oh my goodness, there's been a lot. I've been reflecting on this recently more and more. I always have, and I've always written about the places I've been where it's been difficult, in particular due to my race. For example, I lived in Italy for 5 years, and I was reflecting the other day on the fact that ever okay, I worked for the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, which has its headquarters in Rome. It's beautiful. I got a super experience to be able to work there for 5 years. But it came with a lot of baggage, because there is racism there, and there happened to be many the prostitutes are mostly, either Black or from Eastern Europe. Black, usually a significant amount of them do happen to be from Nigeria. It could be that these are trafficked individuals, which, yeah, that's probably what's happening. That's my feel. However, how it impacted me was that was frequently mistaken to be a prostitute, even when I was on my way to work. I was on my way to work at a decent job for the UN. But it would happen to me, a man, when I was waiting for the bus, I've been propositioned, and it was very awkward for me. And, I was I was 26 at the time, just starting out my career, and having to face that on a daily, daily basis, because either it's happening or you're fearing that it's going to happen. That wasn't nice. And I've reflected more, just in the past few days, and in thinking about, our upcoming conversation, how, how that can affect one. And these are things that I think are important to say. And I had another colleague who worked there. He was male, and we happened to meet when we were both working in the Senegal office. He said when he was in Rome, he had a hijabi colleague, and she had negative experiences there. And as a way to humanize herself, she would wear her badge, her UN badge. At least that, she felt, would be a sign to people, hey, it's humanizing somehow to have a workplace badge, when you're walking the street somewhere, because it validates you too. And these are things people don't really think about, but they happen. Yeah. So how about you, Jacqueline?
Well, well, one of the things I got very clear about, I'm going to get really personal here. So when I was 8 years old, someone interfered with me, so to speak, or tried to interfere with me, is what they say, or someone tried to sexually molest me. They weren't successful, but there was still trauma there.
Right.
And what I realized from that experience was that's when I started to gain weight. So I started using weight as my protection. So if I become big, then nobody would find me attractive or want me, etc. And so then when I went into my first trip to Ghana, and I witnessed the experience of, they talk about Black women, how the slave owners or slave, the guys who were on the boats would line up the women and just choose one for the night and just repeatedly rape them.
Mm.
And so this constant over sexualizing of Black women's bodies have
Mhm.
been a part of my space that I've had to do some incredible work around.
Mhm.
You know, I
Mhm.
had blacked out about that whole experience at 8 years for 35 years. And when it
Wow.
finally came out, it was like, oh my God, I had completely forgotten about it. But
Wow.
I think the space of, you know, Black women in particular being so overly sexualized, and, you know, so many young girls have lost their lives or their youth
Mhm.
because, you know, the assumptions are made about Black women just want to have sex, the assumption that
Mhm.
we're just going to take it. And it becomes,
Right.
I mean, it's, you don't trust the world in another way because it's like, are you really for me or are you there for other reasons? And
Right.
so I'm working through the weight issue through that, but you know,
Wow.
it's just part of that. So let's close this segment and invite folks to just really be a part of the conversation with us. Do you want to share one final piece before, or just a small piece before we open the space, and I'll share one in terms of that captures the.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Jacqueline. So it's a really short piece. It's called My Rebellion.
Mhm.
I'm simply letting go of any label meant to be attached to me, refusing to let anyone define my humanity.
Mm,
Thanks.
thank you. I'll rebuttal that with impasse. This is very short. This is the shortest poem I've
Yes.
ever written. I fight to resist change. You fight to resist change. The floor is open.
I love it.
The floor is open for comments and questions.
Stan's hand is up and going.
Wow, that was absolutely amazing from both of you. Thank you, because so many things that you said, minus the stuff that applies to women, of course. But I can relate to, coming from a Jamaican background myself, right? So, you know, all of the church having to be perfect, right? But then even some of the pain and sorrow too that both of you have spoken about, right? That where again, like Jackie, like you were saying, it's very true. And if you look at Jamaican music, for instance, right, a lot of that music, and even you, Leslie, will know from the Barbados, a lot of that music has been sexually driven, and a lot of things are sort of designed to kind of bring the society to a place where it kind of narrows the margins for people, so that in order to make it in places like that, you literally need to leave. Like my grandparents did the same thing with my father and his siblings, is that enforce the education so that you need to be able to kind of go into go to yard, as they say, right? You have to go to yard because or leave yard because you gotta do something
You
better.
have to go to foreign. You have to go to
Foreign,
foreign.
yeah, go up foreign. That's right. So because of that, then with each generation that passes, so I was born here in Canada, right? But so much of that sort of still sits there, so that as I look at my children who are equally born here, there's that drive and that push to keep doing that, because not that it's a cultural thing per se, but it's instilled in you in a different manner than I find some of my North American born friends are, right? Like where it's a whole kind of different thing where, you know, you'll see the comedians on TV where they talk about how discipline was, but yet when they go to their white friends' houses, it's a whole different ballgame, right? But it's amazing to be able to listen to where you've both taken some very deep journeys and put that into something so beautiful from such a dark place. So thank you so much for sharing that. Like you've actually very much enlightened my evening. Like that's 100%.
Oh, wow.
Well, thanks, Stan the man. But you know, that
Thank
piece you talk
you.
about in terms of go to foreign, I mean, that's one of the other stereotypes we bump up against, because this notion that you can't be successful in your own space. You
Mhm.
must go to the UK, the USA, someplace in Europe to be able to be successful. And I know that my my moment when I got really present to that, I was in Ghana in 2004, and we were having a conversation, and these Ghanaians were having this conversation too, that they can't be successful in Ghana. They had to go to some part in Europe to be successful. And even though one person had just been deported, they were still trying to find a way to get back to Europe to be able to, be able to find ways of taking care of themselves and their families. And ironically, Ghana has one of the strongest economies in Africa, but still. so it's that, but I think one of the things that, inside all of our experiences, even the conditioning at home, because I know the strictness came from, we're going to prepare you for the world outside so nobody can bring attention to you. Or you're going to be so perfect that you're going to fit in, that nobody can then say anything about you, because nobody's going to talk about you in that way. And the economic piece of it is this notion, particularly when countries in the Caribbean and Africa were decolonizing themselves in terms of independence movements. The notion existed that somehow you can't succeed now because the money was being taken away back to England or back to France or wherever, whatever country. And so it's the thing that writing has done for me is to really get me present that this work, this conditioning is not happening in isolation. There's a system that this has been created inside of. And how do I navigate that system to really release that? Because that's the piece, because I thought it was just about the family. And then when I started to peel it back, I'm like, wait a second, this is a whole nother layer of crazy going on.
It's so true.
But thanks for that, Stan.
Anytime. Well, I think it lends something to the fact that doesn't matter what culture you come from, we all have something that we come up in. But I think taking that as an outlet is a really good way to be able to express something that we share, right? Like, so that's amazing. Thank you.
Absolutely.
We got John, you've got something, you had something to say.
Hi, everyone. I'm John Gagnella here in St. John's, Newfoundland and Labrador.
Hi, John from St. John's.
Hi.
I'm not sure if I have anything other to say than, I'm sure I will have something else to say, but I just want to say thank you. Those were really powerful moments you shared. And as Stan said, you pulled beauty out of darkness, which is more than a talent. It's a blessing, it's a gift. I'm interested in how your poetry that you wrote in the past speaks to you today. I'm not really very interested in how you felt at the time, because that was then, but I'm more interested in now. Right. And I'm also wondering about, because I've written some of this myself, but those young women that you still carry with you, and in your case, Jacqueline, a young girl that you still carry with you. I'm interested in how you protect them now, how you guard them, how you take care of them.
Thank you for your question. The way that I have embodied that experience in a way to serve others, I have a group of cousins that I have helped to raise, and it has really been about supporting them to find their own voice, supporting them to be able to be fully expressed in terms of listening for spaces that if you do not feel safe, leave. Finding spaces of being able to express yourself and do not edit yourself in moments when there is truth to be spoken. And I'm telling you, I'm talking about as though they're young, but they're all in their 30 something now. And so they're just amazing persons who are fully self-expressed and just they're able to analyze things that are happening in the moment, versus what I have done is to really kind of track in my past and then trying to heal the past.
I can echo that exactly. Like, that's why it's so amazing to talk with Jacqueline, because it's like it's an echoing of experience, which speaks volumes. So John, those two questions were like so amazing for me, because they allowed me to reflect about on things that I do reflect on anyway. So whether the work withstands the test, like looking back on work that I did maybe as a teenager, young adult, different phases in my life, and I can say yes. And that's the scary thing. My writing has haunted me my whole life, because I would do it as a prescription. I now recognize it was a prescription to myself. I was writing prescriptions to help me through difficult times. And I don't really like to read old work at times. I'm currently in a phase where I can't read that old work. I don't, because there's something brewing right now, times are, let's be frank, they're not easy times that we're living. So, and we're seeing nasty segments surfacing. Let's just put it like that,
Oh, no, it's not surfacing, it's bubbling, girl.
Yes, exactly. I'm trying to be polite, but you're right. It's
This is where you get rid of the good girl
scary,
bit. It's bubbling. It's bubbling.
Thank you. So trying to navigate that space right now, because it's a difficult time, to be frank, I don't really go out. I've become a home person, and I don't know if that's because I'm just like that, or if it's because there's something on the outside that frankly I'm not so interested in. So yeah.
So it's interesting. So one of the things I want to say about your question, there's this notion of the past and the present and the future. What I will say is that sometimes it's all connected, because there are things that have changed, but they haven't changed that much. And I'll tell you that even though I've lived in Ottawa for so many years, and I think Ottawa is a fairly safe city, the day that George Floyd was killed, I went into the shakes. I had no idea where that tremor came from, but I went into the shakes because I was like, oh my God. I thought this was over.
Right.
So that sense of what the past is, as a person of Black African descent, you're not allowed to move beyond the past, but that's part of the rebellion. And I think it's Bell Hooks who says that our lives are a rebellion. The fact that we're living is a rebellion, because the fact that we're still here is part of that whole process of reclaiming space always. But I think for me, the George Floyd situation, it shook me. Because there's one thing, there are two pieces that shook me. Number one was my going to Ferguson a couple of years after Mike Brown was killed there. And secondly, George Floyd, those kind of spaces, because there's a part of you that, because you're quote unquote educated, because all of these things you think, you're past that, but then the past has a way of just coming and just slap you up and say, remember this? Or it's not even remember this, like, this is it.
Yeah, exactly.
and so for the first time, I think after George Floyd, I didn't leave my house for I just left to go to work, and it was because a friend came to pick me up, because I didn't know who was behind me, beside me. And it was like the first time in my life I felt that kind of fear.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. I remember.
We have Blaine has raised his hand. Just whenever you get there, when you have that.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry, go ahead, Blaine. We'll take Blaine, because I know we're running out of time.
Well,
go ahead, Blaine.
First of all, I want to thank both of you. This has been an incredibly informing and informative dialogue thus far. And I appreciate the questions that have been asked. I appreciate the sensitivity and the nuance that is contained in your verse for both of you. And, it resonates with the very strains of my heart as I listen to your voices and applaud them myself. Leslie, this one's for you in a sense that I just heard you say that one of the things that's come out of this experience as you've progressed in life is a fear to essentially go outside,
Mm-hmm.
look outside yourself. And I'm wondering if you perhaps could comment on that in light of your first poem, where you were, I was afraid I never knocked. And I'm wondering, in my own mind, is there a barrier that's being set up that you're afraid to, a door that's being left unopened that you're afraid to knock on? And so perhaps you could
Wow.
elaborate on that just a little bit more.
Thank you so much, Blaine. So yeah, I'm at this time, I'm not really sure. Well, okay, if I'm honest with myself, I don't like going out, and I have only been out maybe 3 times since December, 3 or 4 times. Um, for I try to understand why, and I think to myself, if I go outside, yeah, you know, I might experience something I don't want to deal with. I don't want to deal with it, to be honest. So I just I'm comfortable at home. I have a comfortable home. It's a modest home, but it's our home. There's a small garden outside, so I'm able to, when I want to, get a bit of fresh air. So that's nice. But at the same time, I know that when I'm present enough, I'm able to navigate despite, anything that might be going on around me. I know that, and I've done it. And that was getting past a lot of anxiety, getting past a lot of hangups. And, I'm able to navigate very nicely when I do go out. I have positive experiences more, 99% of the time. Well, maybe 98% of the time. So it's okay. But I've enjoyed working from home, and I'm so struggling by the fact that we might have to return to the workplace because that involves me going outside. So I'm not sure if that's something I need to address more formally, or if I'm a pretty happy person, and I like being home. And I don't know if that's so wrong.
Well, and I'm not suggesting for one moment that there's anything wrong with anything, or anything of that nature. It just
No, it's
struck me.
because I question it in myself all the time.
I was just thinking that, it's that it just reminded me of just a minute. I had that deja vu moment of when you were talking about that, of going back and listening to your voice and listening to and seeing that little girl standing in the dark,
Oh,
crying,
wow.
afraid to knock, that image just came rushing back in on me. So I just,
Oh man, thank you so much. And it ties into what John asked too, because he
yes, yeah,
asked us, how do you protect that young person,
that's
who's
right.
endured these things since they were very young? How do you protect them? And that's for me, I write for that girl because I know, probably somebody else might be needing these messages, and I've had the chance to collaborate with some youth and who recognize these messages, and I'm like, oh my goodness, really? They do, and it's so touching. Gosh, how about you, Jacqueline?
Well, I started to, it's so funny. I've always been a voracious reader, but when I migrated from Jamaica to Canada, being an only child, all of a sudden poetry found me because that was the way that I started to process this new world that I was now in. I didn't understand so many things. And so, and I didn't understand things like why people were in my space, or people were assuming that I was living in a space where I was coming from a space where monkeys were swinging on trees. And I used to have my little Afro puffs, and people used to come into my space to feel my hair. And it was just the the lack of boundaries for me, that was
Mhm.
that was so disruptive and disturbing in so many ways. And you know, persons may have had the best intention, but the impact was
Mhm.
that my personal space was not protected. And so that's how I started to write, to process that whole world that was unfolding for me, that I had come into existence. And I would say that writing became my survival mechanism as well, because I go to the pen whenever I need to figure out anything in my life to this day.
Mhm. Same here.
So we have any more questions before we wrap it up? Leslie, I'm going to ask you to just, is there one final piece you want to share with folks? And then I'll share one final piece.
Okay.
Our extra verses.
Okay. I'll read the very last poem and finish this sentence. It's called Still. Still, I need to relax those muscles made tense and jittery from all this. It takes its toll. Thank you.
I love it. Short, to the point, and sweet, and a great way to respond to the two questions as well. My final piece is called Being, because I think that's the journey that I've been on, is just being with myself and being. So being begets breath, breath begets body, body begets beauty, beauty begets borders, borders begets business, business begets blackness, blackness begets betrayal, betrayal begets brokenness, brokenness begets burdens, burdens begets blame, blame begets bitterness, bitterness begets bravado, bravado begets breakdown, breakdown begets breaking open, breaking open begets breakthrough, breakthrough begets backbone, backbone begets boundaries, boundaries begets beliefs, beliefs begets belonging, belonging begets boldness, boldness begets bravery, bravery begets blessings, blessings begets balance, balance begets becoming, becoming begets being, being begets breath, being begets breath, being begets breath.
Nice. Amazing.
Wow. Thank you. If there's anything at the end of this journey, I just I'll take a moment to see if anyone has any last thoughts. I think you're leaving us all in a very deep reflective space. Just so many moments of time and experiences, and the way that the language that you have given and the space for us to reflect this evening. There's a lot of associations to draw on, I think, for all of us, that it's an expression of our collective humanity, that we are able to see some part of ourselves inside these words. And so thank you to you both for this opportunity to see more of ourselves through you. So thank you for that.
Great. Thank you.
John's got a hand up. Last one, John.
You both will have to come back. I'm sorry, but this is simply not enough.
Yep. We're having these bigger brainstorms at the Canadian Network about possibly looking at podcast possibilities. And I think that this might be a really great opportunity for us to maybe open that door, and maybe we can discuss that more with the two of you as to how to make that happen in a more
Nice.
in a way that we could actually bring some of this more forward. So thank you.
Thank you.
So we do have
Yumi.
we have Yumi, did you have something to say before we go?
Oh no, I was just bawling. All day, and there's a good thing I keep Kleenex by my desk. think you just opened up my heart. And I think probably when I was closing off as a survival mechanism, and the way that you confronted your experiences and done so in such a loving way. It's so powerful. Thank you so much. I'm so glad I came today. I saw Jackie's tweet the other day on Twitter, like, oh, okay, I'm gonna come.
I'm so glad you were here, Yumi. I didn't even see you there before. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much, Yumi.
Thank you.
We do have an extended conference coming up in April. There's lots of information about it on our website, so please do find us and come and join us. Our dates, I just want to be sure I've got the dates right. They are April 20th and 21st. And we will be in the evening, so it's kind of like a double idea jam. It'll be on Zoom. There'll be open conversations and different dialogues happening. So please come and join us as we sort of finish out our year this year. It would be wonderful to see you all there. And please pass it along to any colleagues that you think might be interested. The topic of our conference is limitless. And I think it is an opportunity, again, an expression of our collective humanity and how we come together and how we experience the world and how we're able to share our perspectives in a process of growth and moving forward. So if you have an opportunity to join us on those dates, it would be a great honor for us to have you there. So thank you for this. Thank you, Leslie.
Great.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Thank you, Jacqueline.
Great.
Thank you,
Well, thanks, Leslie, for
Alexis.
saying yes.
Yeah.
My pleasure. Thanks for
Thank
having
you.
me. Thanks, everyone, for coming.
Thank you.
Great.